Schönen guten Vormittag nach Österreich. Herzlich willkommen beim Logistik-Webinar Indien. Mein Name ist Hans-Jörg Hörtnagl. Ich bin seit kurzem der neue Wirtschaftsdelegierte hier für Indien. Bin seit 3 Wochen hier, gemeinsam mit meinem Stellvertreter Bernd Andersson. Ich freue mich, dass Sie heute dabei sind. Now we're going to switch to English. I would like to show you the areas we're responsible. So the Austrian Trade Commission is here in New Delhi. We are having offices in Mumbai and in Bangalore. And we're also having consultants in Sri Lanka and in Bangladesh. So it means here from New Delhi, we are responsible for 6 countries and heading from here. Maybe interesting, at the moment we're having over 150 Austrian companies established here all over India. And India is the 26th largest export destination for Austria. So, as you all know, India got hit very hard by this pandemic, especially in the months of April, May. And of course, like most of the countries all over the world, there was a reduction of GDP. But at the moment, I must say it looks very good. It looks like India has recovered. So we expect for the current economic year growth rate of 8.2%, which is very interesting. And I also can inform you that in the first half of this year, the Austrian exports to India grew by 35.7%. And this growth, very high growth rate for India means, of course, has reflections, has repercussions, has influence in all sectors, especially in the consumer sector, but also in the e-commerce sector. And of course, this is going to have consequences in the logistics sector. And but this means also higher emissions of CO2. So India would like to reduce CO2 emissions. So it means for all these logistics sectors, there will be a need for foreign technology. There will be a need for data analysis. There will be for artificial intelligence. There's a need for automation technology and also for Internet of Things. And the idea of this webinar is to inform you, the Austrian companies, about the interesting potential in this country. And because of any kind of questions you have, our team is here. We would like to guide you. We have designed a special market entry program for Austrian companies. So we do market research, we do market studies, and most importantly, we are finding reliable partners for you. So with that, I end. I pass over and over to my colleague, Mr. Ajay Singh. He is our expert for innovation and new technologies.
Thank you, sir. Good morning for the audience in Austria and good afternoon to the ones joining from India and the Asia region. Thank you very much for joining this webinar on India and the revolution of logistics, how AI and automation are changing the sector. My name is Rajiv Singh and I am the Senior Advisor to the Commercial Counsellor at Advanced Austria, New Delhi. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get into the presentation mode, let me mention few housekeeping rules. First, as you can see, the webinar will take place in English. We will have a dedicated Q&A session at the end. However, if you wish, you can always ask a question in German by using the chat function. I will translate and present your question to our panel. I would like to encourage you to ask the question during the webinar so that we can collect it in the meanwhile and read it out during the dedicated Q&A session at the end. Moreover, it is important to note that the webinar is live, but it will always be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channels. So you don't have to take a screenshot during the webinar. All the presentation will be available on our website as well. With that, I will give you an overview of India and the revolution of logistics, how AI and automation are changing the sector. Especially what the opportunities in the field of logistics in India. First slide, please. Yeah. So if you realize that the logistic industry in India is a leading indicator of the health of the economy. Currently, India logistics sector is valued at 160 billion US dollar and employs about 22 million people directly. It is expected to grow at a CAGR of 10% to 215 billion US dollar by 2022. However, India is in the middle of infrastructure building boom. The government's ambitious National Highway Development Project is planned to expand the current expressway network with almost 18,637 kilometers of greenfield expressway is the call by the year 2022. And there is another project called the Hörtnagl project, and it is aiming to construct again 83,677 kilometers of highway by 2024. This will definitely fuel up logistic movement in India. And let's talk about the digital transformation. It is silently underway and is redefining Indian logistics over the next decade. There is now an entire generation of startups focusing on solving India-specific logistic issue by developing state-of-the-art technology. If we look back in the past 10 years, the contribution of the manufacturing sector in India to the GDP was increased from 16% to 18.32%. Whereas the contribution of the logistics sector is 14.4%. With the introduction of government scheme Make in India, the country aims to bolster the contribution of the manufacturing sector to 25% of the GDP by the year 2025. The logistics sector of India is self-contained in the country's quest to become a manufacturing giant. It's not a surprise at all that the logistics market is in India is forecasted to grow at a CAGR of 10.5% in the period from 2019 to 2025. For obvious reason, we need to support from the government, and there is a lot of scope and initiative are taken by the Indian government as well, such as the government formalized its aim of making India a manufacturing hub by famously launching the Make in India campaign. Another thing is e-commerce growth is a major player in India. This was mainly because e-commerce companies penetrated India's tier 2, tier 3 cities that were otherwise left out in the logistic ecosystem. The reason behind logistic is critical. Now, more than is its e-commerce made it possible for product to find their way all parts of the country. Moreover, technology-led development and advancement made a huge difference. The government has pushed digitization in major way through initiatives such as e-waybill, FASTag, e-invoicing, GPS-based tool, etc. And according to the World Economic Forum 2016, the digital transformation of the logistics sector could translate into a value of 1.5 trillion US dollar for players in the logistics sector and additional 2.4 trillion USD worth of societal benefit by 2025. And the story continues. Today we have flag bearers of the logistics in India. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speakers today. They are going to talk to us about India and the revolution of logistics and opportunities for the Austrian companies. Now, without further ado, I would like to request Mr. Rajiv Singh, Managing Director, Cargo Partners Logistics India, to enlighten us with his keynote and presentation of digital transformation in logistics. Over to you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajay, and glad to be part of this forum. Very good morning, good afternoon to everybody, the panelists, the organizers, and of course, the audience on today's webinar. First of all, a sincere thanks to the Austrian Trade Commission, especially warm welcome to Mr. Hans-Jörg Hörtnagl. I will be happy to see you soon, but I'm also happy to share today our insight into what digital transformation at Cargo Partner looks like, and how are we going through the journey, and how automation and artificial intelligence impacts suppliers, customers, and the providers in the logistics domain. So before I actually introduce the digital transformation at Cargo Partner, let me take a while to introduce Cargo Partner Group as a company. We at Cargo Partner, we are a fast-growing end-to-end logistics provider headquartered in Vienna, Austria. We've expanded our presence since 1983, organically and inorganically, which now enables us to provide integrated logistics services across Europe, the Americas, and the Asia Pacific. We have been delivering innovative solutions to customers across all different types of verticals, whether it's automotive, the pharma industry, the high tech, the retail, regardless of the size. In India, we have been growing our business since 2006 with a strong presence in almost all the major ports and airports of the country. Now, let me come back and do justice to the topic of today's discussion. So, automation logistics. What degree of automation is happening in which areas of logistics? That's the key question. A study from McKinsey gives us a high-level insight of automation in various areas of the logistics value chain. The transportation logistics industry is going through the digital transformation phase. Customers, both enterprises and individuals, are demanding to get their goods transported faster and cheaper. In addition, they expect almost real-time visibility of their goods in transit and the flexibility to change delivery locations. One of the main trends to push logistics, as what Ajay explained in his presentation, into a high degree of automation is the boom in e-commerce. Efficient sorting has become increasingly important, particularly in parcel operations. Advanced conveyor systems use scanners that can pick up barcodes on any side of a package to determine the appropriate action. Automation will affect the supply chain far beyond the walls of warehouses and sorting center. It will change the way goods flow across all modes of transportation. An entirely new logistics paradigm is coming into view. Many operations could be automated by close to 2030, 2035, as artificial intelligence takes over many repetitive activities that logistics companies perform today. We expect to see fully automated high-rack warehouses with autonomous vehicles navigating the aisles. Managers with augmented reality goggles will be able to see the entire operation, helping them coordinate both people and robots. Warehouse management systems will keep track of inventory real time, ensuring it is matched to the ordering system. 3D printers will crank up spare parts made to order. So coming back now into how has artificial intelligence and IoT in logistics performing? Now, technology is continuously disrupting the logistics sector and changing the way how freight, sales orders, materials, goods, production, inventory are managed. Businesses always look for a solution that can bring intelligence to the logistics operations workflow and help reduce high cost. As speed, intelligence, efficiency became the significant determining factors, the logistics sector has adopted emerging technologies like the GPS for seamless track and trace, IoT to manage assets, RFID to track inventory, or AI for chatbots, agility in operations, or AR and VR and robots assisted by cloud computing. For these technologies to provide the required return on investment, they must be implemented across the logistics value chain to streamline business processes, thereby increasing efficiency and strengthening the customer relationship. This means multiple of the logistics processes need to be automated, and with each process at a different degree of automation. Take carrier management, for example, here. Using predictive analytics algorithms, carriers can identify if the deliveries are done efficiently or not. AI-enabled analytics facilitate tracking of shipments from departure points to the final destination and send tracking reports during the journey. Real-time monitoring of goods provide information include like tampering or theft during the journey, departure and arrival times, live location of the shipment, or any deviations from the scheduled route. With all the information in hand before the shipment reaches the destination, logistics companies can improve the pickup and delivery of orders. AI and IoT are disrupting logistics and transportation management by making logistics operations more smarter day by day. So let me give you an insight into what are we doing at Cargo Partner. At the Cargo Partner Group, we are investing to solve complex problems by understanding customer expectations. One such initiative is a supply chain collaboration platform called SpotWorks. SpotWorks is a neutral corporate startup ensuring customer centricity in the field of digital supply chain visibility and collaboration. As a dedicated IT sales organization of the Cargo Partner Group, SpotWorks focuses in selling the supply chain visibility and collaboration platform Spot as a software as a service solution to its own as well as Cargo Partner 3PL customers. As a leading provider of a cloud-based supply chain management software, we help companies around the world to create value throughout the global supply. Spot helps reduce cost, enhance flexibility, and lower risk. By creating a digital model of the goods and information involved, we enable visibility and better collaboration between all the partners in the logistical process. Let me give you a better insight into some of these modules, what the SpotWorks has to offer. Take an example of the time slot management. Time slot management helps to prevent truck queues at your warehouses. It manages the flow of vehicles to and from your ramps. It also helps to increase the efficiency of your incoming and outgoing goods. Or the e-warehouse module. It helps to simplify the dispatch process. It helps to smoothly access the stock activities or even get the KPIs that you need. Or the parcel module. It connects all your CEP providers on one platform to enable price comparison, label printing, and tracking of shipments, whether manually via user interface or automatically from a warehouse through ERP system via our API. Spot Parcel also lets you generate carrier compliant labels, so you no longer need to log in into each separate provider's system to print shipment and return labels. Always know where your parcels are. With all the transports on one platform, Spot makes it easy to track your parcel shipments and see all important events at one glance. Or you can also choose from different payment options. Select a payment option, whether it's to a shipper or through a shipper has to pay, or a third party or receiver for your shipping. The shipping cost as well as duties and taxes will automatically be invoiced to the respective account or receive notifications when discrepancies arise. And maybe I'll also speak a little bit about one of the modules called transport management module. So this module, you can actually ease out the transport booking process. We'll be able to track and trace your goods. We'll be able to define shipping rules. We'll also be able to easily communicate with all the parties involved. You will also be able to archive all the documents, shipping documents, invoice, the packing list in the system. And this system also provides intelligent container tracking, which is what I will explain to you in my next slide. But the intelligent container tracking, it receives all relevant tracking information like departure, transshipment, arrival, etc. of the loaded vessels via interface directly from vessel operators. If information from vessel operators is missing or delayed, the vessel's position and thus the current position of the container is determined by the GPS. So how does the intelligent container tracking works? So if you can see from the slide, by combining decades of experience with the latest technology, we are able to provide a tool to calculate the vessel position at any given point of time. It is a new tracking service for sea freight shipments, which gives users access to detailed information. Some of the key benefits from our container tracking service for FCL shipments are full transparency over your container transports, 24/7 live data availability, proactive information about exceptions, and 98% data quality. This intelligent container tracking tool is able to integrate with all different service providers and has helped customers give them live updates of containers stuck in transit, especially during the Suez Canal incident. They did not have to struggle to manual tracking and chasing different stakeholders. All this helps our customers to accurately keep track of their sea freight container shipments. Maybe elaborating a little bit on what Spot does and what are the features of Spot. As I had told you earlier, it receives all relevant tracking information via AIS, the vessel departure, arrival at transshipment points, arrival at port of discharge, etc., directly from vessel operators, ports, and terminal on container level. If information from vessel operators is missing or delayed, The current position of the vessel and thus of the container is determined by the GPS. Now, an intelligent algorithm then calculates all planned data for the next events and updates potential deviations. Using geofencing technology, the time and place a vessel enters a certain zone are recorded, and the algorithm recalculates all planned dates for the milestone events. This automated system replaces manual data entry. It results in higher efficiency and reduced costs and ensure maximum efficiency, minimized errors, and speedy information exchange. Furthermore, the new alert function enables management by exception, focusing on deviations with high risk potential. So for us, it is not just about automation or using a modular approach at Cargo Partner. It is more about digital transformation, a transformation which helps to solve complex problems facing our customers. It is a journey which will help us to continuously invest in technology. This journey starts with how we engage with our customers in being able to create awareness about our products and services. Will they be able to make smart and cost-effective choices in our environment? Once the choice is made, can we enable quick online booking, planning, and executing a shipment? With our AI-enabled track and trace, we are sure to bring value to our customers' business and build a strong loyalty. We at Cargo Partner believe in living our core values, and digital transformation will remain at the core of our business. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Singh, for your amazing presentation. We are really honored to have you today with us. Now I request Mr. Niki Frank, CEO, DHL Global Forwarding India and South Asia, to give his presentation on challenges and opportunities of the Indian logistics sector. Over to you, Mr. Frank.
Ja, thank you very much, Ajay, and ein herzliches Grüß Gott nach Österreich. I've been living myself for 7 years in Vienna, and it's always a pleasure to reconnect with my former home. As Ajay said, I'm CEO for South Asia of DHL Global Forwarding, and would like to talk to you about the challenges and opportunities of the logistics sector in general, and particularly for India, especially given the current market environments, but also with a view to the trends and changes that are impacting the logistics sector overall. Before doing so, let me quickly give you an overview as to who we are. I am sure many of you would have heard about the Deutsche Post DHL Group as the world's largest logistics company. Our portfolio comprises the German postal and parcel business under the brand of Deutsche Post. Our DHL e-commerce solutions for cross-border e-commerce business, our DHL Express business, the world's largest courier service, DHL Supply Chain, which is our contract logistics business, managing warehouses and local distribution for customers, as well as the business I'm responsible for here in South Asia, DHL Global Forwarding. At DHL Global Forwarding, we look after the air freight and ocean freight movements, as well as industrial projects, so all out-of-gauge cargo, oversized cargo. In India, our footprint is pretty broad. We are the largest multinational freight forwarder in the country, shipping more than 100,000 tons of air freight in imports and exports every year, more than 115,000 standard ocean freight containers, and more than 200,000 cubic meters of less than container load cargo. In addition, we are one of the very few multinational freight forwarders who have their own customs brokerage license without relying on subcontractors, and we clear more than 130,000 customs shipments for our customers with our own staff. As one of the very few companies in India and the only one in the logistics sector, we are a great place to work in India and certified also as a top employer, which is a testament to the high motivation of our more than 1,000 people who are working for us here in India. If you look at India from a footprint perspective, with 28 offices, we basically cover the entire geography of the country, from the main cities to also the larger tier 2 and tier 3 cities. We are present with our own operations staff at all international airports and seaports, and we offer warehousing solutions in free trade zones as well as customs bonded warehouses in Mumbai, Chennai, and Bangalore. And with a subcontracted trucking network of nearly 4,000 vehicles, we also cover the country from a domestic distribution perspective. Now, that much as a brief introduction and background to DHL Global Forwarding. I want to talk to you about the challenges and opportunities in logistics from two perspectives. First, I want to take a quick look at some of the overarching trends that are impacting logistics. And secondly, I also want to deep dive into the role of logistics during the pandemic and why logistics has become much more relevant and has become much more into the spotlight over the last 18 months, and also how we are using new technologies in the current environment. So from a trends perspective at Deutsche Post DHL, we have a very intensive process of looking and monitoring global trends, and we distill them further down to identify which of those are most relevant for logistics and for our businesses. And they are an essential and underlying part of our business strategy. The four key trends that are impacting our business and that are underlying our strategy are globalization, e-commerce, sustainability, and digitalization. I think globalization, I don't have to explain what we mean by that, but maybe let me make one comment here, as we are reading a lot over the last few months in the press about speculations that globalization is dead, the pandemic has ended globalization, there will be a lot of nearshoring, reshoring, nationalism, etc. We don't see that, and we don't believe in that, because ultimately consumers are the driving force behind globalization, and consumers are interested in more choice, in more efficiency, and also in cheaper products. And that will, in our view, further drive globalization also in the future. E-commerce is a trend that I think all of us have experienced personally as well when shopping online. And the last 18 months, the coronavirus pandemic has accelerated the e-commerce trend dramatically. All projections that were in place, also the projections that we had made for our strategy, have been gone overboard, because the development that we had foreseen for the next 5 years literally happened within 12 months. So there's been a massive boom to e-commerce. And even though economies are opening up now again, city centers and shopping malls are opening up, consumers will continue to shop online as well. And that advancement in the drive of e-commerce will be sustained, and there will be further growth in our views, impacting the way we have to think about logistics solutions, about multi-channel or omni-channel services, deliveries to door, deliveries to store, etc. Sustainability is a key topic for us at DHL and for the logistics industry overall. And I'm very happy to realize that over the last couple of months, the topic has also gained significantly more attention on a global scale again, after being somewhat subdued during the beginning of the crisis. The logistics sector represents a substantial footprint in terms of emissions, and it is essential that logistics contributes to contain global warming and to reduce emissions. At Deutsche Post DHL, we have set ourselves a zero emission target for the year 2050, with very concrete interim targets also by 2025 and 2030, including renewing all our delivery fleet with electric vehicles, or at least emission neutral vehicles. We have already started pilots with sustainable aviation fuel to reduce the emission of our own airline, as well as compensation of emissions in ocean freight by offsetting all LCL shipments for our customers at our own cost, and offering also the offsetting for full container load cargo. Now, digitalization is undoubtedly one of the most relevant trends, not just impacting logistics, but the world overall. And arguably, logistics has been very late to the game. It's one of the last industries that is looking into digitalization, that is being affected by digitalization, and that is taking the trend serious now. And I want to look a little bit more into that, as this is also a core topic for today. So if you look at the status of the logistics industry, and just to give you a few indications, it clearly highlights why there is an urgent need for more digitalization in the industry. Right? If you look into logistics departments, if you look into logistics providers' offices these days, if you look into carriers, a large part of the business is still very much paper-driven. Also, if you go into warehouses, if you look at the physical operations, the vast majority of these are still manually operated. There's very little use of robots, of computers, of machines to support the operations or to autonomously conduct the operations. And again, if you go into some of the offices or logistics departments, you wouldn't be surprised to find fax machines. Right? So logistics, by and large, is still manual and analog and is not yet digitized and automated. And many companies have only just started to look into the opportunities, the possibilities, and have realized the need to adopt digitalization. Otherwise, there will be no future for them in this industry. The way we look at digitalization, new technologies, and new tools at DHL follows a very stringent and comprehensive process. We have our own innovation team with 3 innovation centers also around the globe, in Chicago, in Germany, as well as in Singapore, and a recent one that's going to be open soon in Dubai. And as part of these innovation centers, we showcase applications and new innovations, and also showcase and participate how we interact with customers on those. What we typically do is we follow a trend radar that we update regularly every second year, where we monitor all global trends and distill them into those that are relevant for logistics and that are also relevant in the near term, say within 3 to 5 years. Once we identify some of those trends, we then get into deep dives with research institutes, with startups, with other corporate partners to identify use cases and to build prototypes. And then from these prototypes, if they are successful, we actually transfer them into our different business units to apply them in our operations. I'll just give you a couple of examples to make this a little more tangible. For example, at the bottom left, you see augmented reality. That has been a trend that we identified a couple of years ago in our trend radar. And you would remember some 5, 6 years ago, news headlines about Google Glass, the vision, the smart glass that Google introduced, which by and large for Google was a failure, but for the industry itself, it was not. So what we started at that time is actually working on prototypes with companies, with customers, and we've introduced since then in a lot of our warehouses smart glasses to enable vision picking. So the operator in the warehouse wears these smart glasses, which indicate to him to which bin to go, how many parts to pick, whether this is the right part or whether it's the wrong part. So it adds additional information and thereby not only increases the accuracy, but also the efficiency. Similarly, when we look at robots and at automation, a couple of years ago, this was identified as an impactful trend for the logistics industry, and we started to work with robot companies on prototypes. And by now, we have a couple of fully automated warehouses around the globe, where you hardly see any operators. You basically see a fleet of robots going in between the aisles, bringing the products from the shelves, picking them and bringing them to the delivery point. That is something also that is continuously evolving, be it completely autonomous robots, semi-autonomous, or collaborative robots that, for example, help our human staff, our employees, loading very heavy cargo or very oversized cargo. Another example is Internet of Things, and particularly low-cost sensors. So this is an application we use in many areas within our business and for our customers. On the one hand, we use this internally for asset tracking, and also asset information, for example, constantly getting data about our forklifts or material handling equipment, about the battery status, the wear and tear of the machine, when it's going to be refueled or re-energized, when it has to be plugged in if it's an electric forklift. But we also use it externally for customers, for example, to track containers or other assets. We apply smart locks to containers, which not only capture or provide security and give an alert when the container is opened. It also provides a constant signal where the container is located, but it also can measure with sensors inside the container temperature, humidity, light, and other factors. And that is, for example, an application that has been constantly used over the last 12 months when shipping vaccines for COVID-19 around the world. As you are all aware probably from the news, these are extremely temperature sensitive shipments, and any deviation outside of the temperature range would make the vaccine useless. Therefore, monitoring that on a constant basis with low-cost sensors is one of the applications that is now very broadly used in logistics. One of the major trends, and we've heard a bit about this already today, and I'm sure we're going to hear more also from the other panelists, is AI. AI has only started to get an inroads into logistics, but we foresee this to have a major impact. And why? Because AI has the power with its prediction and vision capabilities to drive the optimization and management of supply chains in different ways. One example you see depicted here on the right-hand side is vision recognition. So for example, when you think about automated robots, automated vehicles, automated forklifts, you need a very accurate detection of the environment, be that in the warehouse or be that outside. And AI already today is able to accurately identify objects, be it physical objects or also be it humans. And it's able to predict also movements of objects, particularly if humans are involved. But that's just one area. Another important one for logistics is the predictive analytics and the predictive power, which will massively help to increase the efficiency and accuracy in logistics. And I'm going to talk a little more about that when I talk about the current situation in the industry. So let me come to that second point of my presentation, the current situation and the role of logistics in the pandemic. Well, logistics certainly has gained massive attention during the pandemic, either because people suddenly realized that it's difficult to buy toilet paper or pasta in the supermarket, or because of the attention that was put on vaccine movements and vaccine shipments. But also if you are trying to buy garden furniture, bicycles, or other usual items that you never had thought about where they come from. These days, there are a lot of problems in company supply chains, and logistics has got a lot more attention, and people are realizing the essential role of logistics. So what is the current market situation? Well, we have capacity constraints in all modes, be it air freight, ocean freight, rail, inland transportation. There's capacity shortages everywhere. We have equipment shortages, especially in ocean freight and particularly in inland locations. We're facing port and airport congestions across the world. All major airline hubs are choked with cargo. A lot of ports are congested. There are more than 100 vessels currently waiting outside of the West Coast ports of the US, of Los Angeles and Long Beach, trying to get a space to berth. And that is now cascading downwards to the East Coast of the US, to the ports of New York and New Jersey or Savannah. At the same time, and driven by these capacity and equipment constraints, freight rates have seen unprecedented levels. And whether you talk to logistics colleagues within companies, or whether you talk to any logistics provider, and you talk to the slightly more gray-haired people who are in the industry for 3-4 decades, all of them would agree that they've never seen a situation like this before. The schedule reliability of carriers has come to an all-time low. While during normal times and good times, ocean freight carriers had a schedule reliability around the 90% mark, meaning that 90% of their vessel arrivals follow the predicted schedule. They are now down to 30% and less. Similar challenges occur in the air freight market because the capacity relies mainly on freighter planes, and if there is not sufficient inducement, then or if there are issues with the crew due to quarantine measures or corona infections, freighter connections are just cancelled and the capacity is dropped. So all in all, this leads to massive supply chain disruptions, and the reason behind this is that we are facing a huge demand-supply gap. What you see in these two graphs here is the growth rates of demand and supply in ocean freight at the top and in air freight at the bottom. And you see for the ocean freight graph that for the last couple of years, we've always been in a situation where supply grows faster than demand. And in a situation where there was huge overcapacity in the market, this has typically led to downward drive of prices and freight rates, and carriers have undercut each other to get cargo on board. Now that situation has completely reversed with the beginning of the pandemic. And since the supply now is at its maximum, but demand is significantly outpacing the supply, we're seeing a huge gap, which is also leading to these high freight rates. And also, if you look to the far end of the graph, to the estimate for 2022, that might be bad news for many shippers. There's no easing in sight. The market situation will remain very tight also throughout most of next year. The bottom graph shows you the air freight market from the beginning of the pandemic until earlier this year. And also here you clearly see the drop in the red line, which is the freight capacity, which has been driven by the grounding of passenger flights. And you see the demand, how it outpaces the supply, meaning again that the freight rates are extremely high. And also here, we will only see an easing of the situation once passenger flights get back, especially international passenger flights, and once people travel again. So what does that mean, and what's the impact to supply chains? Well, certainly there's a lot of unpredictability, which is a problem if you are working in supply chain management or in logistics, because what sales, what production, what everyone else expects from you is predictability. They want assurance and they want consistency, but in the current times, there's unpredictability and lack of consistency. In addition, there are huge cost escalations. I don't know any of our customers who is still within their logistics budgets. Everybody is outspending because the market rates have just exceeded every norm. And there's a lot of discussion about, shifting of sourcing, shifting of footprints, moving factories, finding new suppliers. But that only leads to more unpredictability and inconsistency in the short term, as it's not easy to shift your supplier network or to shift your production network in the short term. So is it all doom and gloom? Well, luckily not, because the logistics industry and companies like ours can do a lot to help you overcome these challenges. Be that through innovative transport solutions or alternative transport modes, helping you in adjusting your supply chain and your footprint, but also, and that brings me back in a few minutes again to some of the technological solutions, through higher visibility and enabling a better planning, and through data-driven analytics. So just to give you a few ideas, and I'm not going through all of those points, but for example, in air freight, we have been able to keep the operational flexibility and seamlessly manage the operations even when most of our people here in India were working from home. As the largest freight forwarder in the world, we do have regular and dedicated capacity. We also can rely on our own DHL aviation, airline, and capacity. And through our in-house charter team, we have been able to add significant capacity into the network for our customers with dedicated charter flights. Likewise, on the ocean freight market, we have introduced innovations and new concepts that are the bread and butter business in air freight, concepts like block space agreements, where you commit to fixed capacity with the carriers and the customers commit also to fixed capacity. That has never been there in the ocean freight market, but we've introduced that also into the ocean freight world, and thereby been able to guarantee our customers equipment and loading space on dedicated vessels, and thereby being able to move their cargo even in these difficult times. Another very interesting concept we've introduced is Lcl Reefers, and they are particularly connections between Europe and India to address the capacity constraints that are existing on the air freight side and also the cost escalations, and to be able to still ship life-saving drugs, therapeutic medicines, pharmaceutical devices, also for COVID-19. And then a concept that is always coming up during crisis mode, sea air or air sea solutions, multimodal solutions, where we've identified different routings and different capacities to have a multimodal opportunity by first using an ocean freight leg and then flying the cargo from a larger hub where capacity is better, or the other way around, to first fly out cargo out of India into a larger port where more capacity is available. So if I come to the predictability and visibility, we have what we call MyDHLi, which is our customer platform, which offers customers real-time visibility combined with detailed analytics and a set of unique collaboration features. The platform not only follows all state-of-the-art user experience guidelines, but it also offers standard tools like a quotation opportunity to receive quotes, irrespective of whether you're looking for an air freight shipment, an LCL shipment, an FCL, a rail shipment, or a truck movement. And it offers you all state-of-the-art tracking functionalities that all modern platforms can provide. But beyond that, the platform also gives you a full visibility and analytics functionalities, behind which there's data analytics competency that is provided by the platform. It's a complete document repository, including airway bills, sea bills, commercial invoices, packing lists, etc. So basically all the documents involved in your shipping process. But the one feature that makes it really stand out and unique in comparison to other industry platforms is its follow and share functionality, which has been adopted from social media. So with MyDHLi, you are able to select certain shipments and follow them actively. And that means every milestone, every event that happens to your shipment automatically gets notified to you on your smartphone or via email, depending on your preferences. So whether the shipment has been picked up, whether it has reached the cargo terminal, whether the aircraft or the vessel has departed, whether there's a delay, all of these get automatically notified, and you are able to follow your shipment throughout. And you are also able to share that information, be it with colleagues, with end customers, or other partners that need to be aware of the status of your shipment. And the same information that you get on your regular updates are also updated then to the people that you share this with. So that's one tool that helps our customers during the current times by getting better visibility and transparency. Another tool that I would like to highlight, and which comes back to the topic of AI, is our Everstream analytics platform. This is a cloud-based AI-powered platform that provides predictive and real-time analysis. What the tool does is screening more than 8 million websites and news sites and sources on a very regular basis to collect all kinds of information and to collect an overview of all kinds of different risks. These can be supplier risks, for example, production stops at a certain tier 2 or tier 3 supplier, workplace accidents, telecom outages, cyber attacks. It includes natural risks, natural disasters, be it earthquakes, volcano eruptions, ice storms, blizzards, floodings, etc. It also includes transportation risks, so all kinds of information about port strikes or port congestions, a train derailment, cargo theft incident, new customs regulations, and also social-political risks like a terrorist attack, civil unrest, protests, riots, etc. What the tool then does, it collates all of that information, and powered by AI, it identifies and sends alerts to our customers when they have either a fixed asset in one of these locations where there's a risk identified, or when it affects one of the trade lanes that they are serving. And with that information, customers are luckily able to predict and optimize their supply chain by getting that predictive visibility for both their inbound supply as well as their outbound transportation. They can improve the service to their end customers, optimize inventory, asset utilization, and also react to an incident before it fully materializes. And we have seen the impact of that, for example, with customers who were very early on alerted about Suez Canal blockage. So those customers were still able to reroute their shipments. We've seen this with port closures in China recently, where customers were able to use alternate ports, etc. So to sum it up and conclude, the logistics industry is facing some challenges in the current environment, but there are massive opportunities that technology can bring to the logistics industry, not only to the benefit of the companies in the logistics industry, but largely to the benefit of our customers, to all shippers and consignees, through better visibility, better transparency, higher efficiency. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frank, for your insightful presentation. It's really great to see such an innovative technology and the concept with a successful implementation. Thank you again, Mr. Frank. And also, may I remind our audience, you can ask question via chat function right now as well, and I will make sure to bring it to our speakers at the end of all the presentation. Now I would request Mr. Boby Mohan, Chief Information Officer, TBS Supply Chain Solutions, to give his presentation on artificial intelligence in supply chain. Over to you, Mr. Mohan.
Thank you, Ajay. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Happy to be here talking to you about how artificial intelligence is going to play an extremely important role, if not already, and also to have a quick look at what the future would look like when we get into working a lot with AI. So without much ado, let me jump into the presentation. Before we jump into AI and the possibilities, a few words about TVS Supply Chain Solutions, what we do, and how we intend to produce technology in our businesses. TVS Supply Chain Solutions is among India's top 3 supply chain companies. We are a global company that is headquartered in India, and that essentially gives us a unique advantage of being able to leverage a lot of the startup and the innovations and technology that India brings to the table, and also to take that to scale across the globe. So a lot of the case studies that I would speak about here would be about how we have taken one of these innovations, put stuff together, made it work in India, and then how do we plan to take that across the globe. The agenda pretty much would be about a quick look at AI as it is today, how we use it, and then spending some time looking at the future and essentially trying to see look into the crystal ball, have a brief discussion around spatial and how spatial is going to change the world we live in, and how quickly is that going to happen. I just would want to build upon the discussions my colleagues have had previously around where we use supply chain. So presently, if we look at it, the use of supply chain and the use of AI in supply chain is pretty much in terms of understanding the disruptions. We heard about how we are scouring the web and bringing about possibilities and letting people know about what would happen in terms of disruptions. So companies like IBM have already brought in technology which would do that, which would enable companies to be able to predict their supply chain at a very granular level, and you would also understand that various organizations are using it. Second area where AI would come in quite handy is when we look at real-time routing of vehicles and so on. So you need to essentially understand the concept that there is a set of disruptions that an AI engine has understood, and you can use that to then communicate to your vehicles to say that, hey, you know what, don't take this route, take a different route. There is probably a road blockage happening there, or there is some sort of an accident which has happened there, which might delay your delivery, so you take a different route and still get where you want to. Now, Again, an example, there are companies like DTrack, which do that as a service, as a product, and of course, all of us in our day-to-day life, we do that with Google and the other mapping applications. Where supply chains benefit is when we use this in an automated manner as a regular part of life, which is something that we do here in TVS supply chain. The third, of course, is the whole concept of taking all these data, the routing data, the disruption data, and to create the future, anticipate what will happen. So you know that this is the demand pattern, you know that this is the way the transportation is moved, this is the way the vehicles or the roads have behaved, and thereby how will it look like 1 week from today. So all the past data, the rich past data that you're sitting with, how can you put all of that together to create, just give me a second, I'm sorry. To create the future and to essentially plan for that in a much better manner, and thereby leading to meeting your customer demands much more fast. So that's essentially a present day use case of supply chains where people are using it. Of course, needless to say, visual picking in warehouses, ability to use visual aids in warehouses, ability to be understanding transportation lead times and so on and so forth, etc. All come into the same ambit of using supply chain presently and using it for analytics and AI. And what helps us today in this entire journey is the fact that AI has become as ubiquitous in today's world as probably mobile applications are. It is available for all of us to leverage. The cloud computing powers made available to all of us are immense and limitless, if I might say, and thereby companies like us and consumers like all of us who are on the other side of this table pretty much stand to benefit much from the use of AI in supply chain. I'd quickly jump into a small use case of how we in TVS supply chain would have used AI already. So I take two cases. The first scenario is when we do transportation and we do in-city and in logistics for most of the large automobile manufacturers in India, and for one of them, we do the whole process of consolidating their parts and bringing it to their manufacturing center so that they can make their vehicles. So what it basically means is that on a given day, you are collecting parts from 70 to 80 suppliers. Each of these suppliers and each of these parts have different dimensions, different ways of packaging, and so on and so forth. And given the way in which the production schedules vary for the end client, the kind of parts that you pick up are also quite different. So the challenge that we were trying to address was how do you define and how do you identify and finalize on what are the kind of trucks that you would need and how would you load those trucks most optimally. It's always easy to say that deploy as many trucks as you would like, but then the trick here is to say that how would you do that effectively in a manner where your trucks are loaded optimally and thereby the trip has optimum costing and thereby the best benefit accrues to both the client and for the company in particular. So we used AI, and what AI did was typically analyze the patterns of demand, analyze the production patterns, look at the parts that you're supposed to pick up, look at the load of the parts, look at the trucks that are available, look at the distances, bring it all together and do the computation on a real-time basis. And every day at 9 in the morning, give out a plan to say that, hey, listen, these are the trucks that you should deploy to these suppliers, these parts you would pick up so many tires, you would pick up so many crankshafts, so many headlights, what else it is, and thereby this essentially would say that your costs are at this level. So, which was a big shift from this being done completely by a set of people who sat down and tried to do that, And by moving into AI and using the way AI is, it helped us essentially to make this process, which otherwise took a lot of time, to compress that, and 10 minutes time we're done, and at the same time derive maximum benefit from optimizing uh, load, truck, and space. So that's the first of the use cases we did here in TVS supply chain, and that's really helped us, and we're looking at essentially rolling that out across all the fleet vehicles that we have, and to make sure that every trip that we do is planned for in this manner. The second scenario is when we get into a warehouse, and this again is a warehouse where we work with another large auto major. When we receive parts in the warehouse, now these parts keep coming in bulk. These people again manufacture a lot of motorbikes on a given day with a throughput of about one motorbike every 53 seconds. So to keep pace with that line, we had to figure out a methodology by which the incoming material, as soon as it comes in, is identified, done the quality, and then we route it into the right exact place it's supposed to be in, and thereby onto the production line. So there we leveraged vision systems. So we have AI-enabled cameras sitting, looking at material that come in. It identifies what is the material that is coming in based on the image identification logic that is inbuilt, qualifies it for traveling into whichever direction it should go so that it gets put away into the right place. The second area inside the same warehouse where we use AI is to say that, let's say, we are packing material into big cartons to be shipped out. And while we do packing, it's always possible that you would take the wrong part and put it into the box. But then out in this scenario, we have cameras which are there which would track what gets put inside a box. If there is a wrong material that is placed inside a box, in real time, there is an alert that goes on, the line gets stopped, and you are immediately able to correct that. So again, AI comes to us. This system runs on the edge, which basically means that it is on the cloud, but the cloud sits inside the warehouse, and you're able to quickly act and react and provide 100% error-free operations to your clients. Two simple examples where we have used AI, leveraged AI, and there are a few other projects like this in the pipeline where we are really looking to leverage the capabilities of vision, the capabilities of video analytics, etc., to increase the efficiencies of our operations and thereby ensure that the clients get better and better from our side. So that's pretty much on the case studies from our side. Now I take a few moments to look into the future and to have a discussion with you as to where are we looking at AI going, So typically, the ecosystem of the future, as I see it and as we see it, and as our innovation teams are working on, works on three key elements of the technology revolution that we are in. At the middle, of course, it's the AI brain, which enables systems to consume data, to process data, and to make decisions. On the other side, what is the most important piece is that this data will no more come from Excel sheets or data files. The data would come in from smart equipment, smart devices, connected vehicles, smart warehouses, and connected robots. So typically, we are talking about a scenario where a robo in a warehouse will start transmitting data to the forklift to say, hey, come, there's something for you to pick up because I have just unloaded a big order here. And likewise, the third leg of this entire scenario is where we store the data. We see more and more of blockchain being your preferred data storage. Now, blockchain as a technology is catching up slowly. And like all exponential technologies, we hope that the usage is going to go through the roof very soon. The advantage of blockchain is if you go on to a blockchain model of storing data, data security, data sanctity are two things that one need not really bother about. At the same time, your data is available for people to act upon. You're federating data, and data becomes truly democratic. So blockchain, a concept, a future that is imminent for us. IoT, which is already something that we all know, we all work with, is going to explode together with the powers of AI that we have today. And the result is going to be a world that will be quite different from what we see today. We will delve into that both, and we'll essentially figure out a few scenarios of it would be a little skeefy, if you may, but this is skeefy that's coming at you much faster than we think. What is also going to help us is the advent of 5G across the globe, which enables us to transmit data, transmit information much faster, bigger chunks of information across the networks. So that entire ability to collect data, to transmit data, to process data, to store data, and to share data is going to change the way supply chains are run, the world will operate in the world of logistics. Let me take you into the future. So what are we saying? We are saying that the future is all about the spatial, right? And spatial, as it's technically defined, is about saying that every piece of data comes with its location information, and the location information of that piece of data is the key for us to be able to do anything. So if you look at typically look back into time and see how things have evolved with internet communication applications and data, you know, when we started off, and this again are for people who have gray hair like me, when we started off, the internet was about running programs on your desktop connecting to a database. That was about 20, 25, 30 years ago, where if you look at the protocol that we used, technology protocol, it used to be called TCP/IP. TCP/IP was a protocol that essentially was about sending data, transacting data in small pieces, and computing, etc., happened at the desktop, and of course there was a database that you scoped it. Then you moved into the web world, where of course the desktop was replaced by a browser. Your application logic sat in the website or in the app layer, as we call it, and there were a series of servers. So you had the data center that came in, and the entire ecosystem of Web 1.0 worked on the strength of the technology that is known as HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Over time into the 2000s, we suddenly saw the whole app scenario, the mobile scenario, the cloud scenario come at us, and it came, and it is essentially now something that we all work with as de facto. In Web 2.0, the browser has been replaced by a mobile phone. Your logic sits in the apps, and the data and the transactions happen on the cloud. We don't really know where the cloud is. We don't have a data center. It's up there somewhere. We know we own it. We know there's protection, and that's pretty much that. Web 3.0, which is where we're going to speak about right now, takes you to the next level, where instead of mobile, we are now speaking about IoT systems talking to each other, VR systems talking to each other, which typically will be your sources of data, sources of transactions, connected ecosystems, where your fridge will talk to your air conditioner, will throw up some data, which will be picked up by some this device sitting at home, be it your Alexa or your Google Nest or whatever, which will be processed onto the cloud. That in turn would be consumed by an AI, and then it will go into a blockchain, which would be the essential information on which your retailer will work with. You know, if you look at all the components, the elements are there in our houses, in our lives today. We are talking about a world where all of this will come together under the protocol of HSTP, Hyperspatial Transfer Protocol. Now, what exactly would our HSTP help us with? HSTP essentially envisages a world where every device, which is connected, of course, has an address. So which means today your computer has an IP address, but tomorrow we expect that not just your but your car will have an IP address, your TV will have an IP address, your fridge would have an IP address, And these IP addresses are secure IP addresses, which are part of a larger network of connected equipment, and they are in turn communicating with each other. So let's say you have a scenario where you're running out of pasta, and your fridge knows that because the pasta in the fridge is less than what it should be. So the AI sitting inside the fridge is aware that, okay, there is a pasta shortage coming. So the AI is trained to connect that information and then relay it via a blockchain to the outside world, saying, hey, listen, this is the address, because of course the fridge, has a spatial address for it. So there is a spatial to the fridge. This address is broadcast with the demand, and there's somebody, some vehicle, some autonomous vehicle in the region, which is ready to pick that information up. So the autonomous vehicle picks that information up from the blockchain, saying that, hey, Bobby Mohan's fridge is running short of pasta. We need to deliver 2 bags of Farfarel pasta to Bobby. Now that demand goes into the autonomous vehicle, because that's the vehicle that would deliver it to you. And the vehicle in turn, being of the nature autonomous, has AI with which it will relay it back to a warehouse or a manufacturer, depending on what the scenario is, and strike up the concept of a smart contract. What is a smart contract? A smart contract is a contract that happens between AI equipment, and which is about one transaction. So here you have the fridge throwing up a demand which is picked up by an autonomous vehicle, and at that point in time there is a smart contract that gets executed between the fridge and the autonomous vehicle, which says, hey, 2 packets of Farfarel pasta going to cost me X rupees, and both of them sign on to it saying, okay, if that happens, we are connected to bank accounts, the transaction will happen. Now the autonomous vehicle is in turn, the AI is creating a smart contract back with the warehouse, where the communication is, okay, give me 2 packets of Farfarel pasta, and the AI already understands that it has to do it at a margin. There is going to be a price impact and a cost impact. So that computation gets done, a reverse auction if it is required gets done, and the best price is picked. Now we know that the pasta is going to come from a warehouse. There is a vehicle that's going to deliver it, and the fridge that's going to receive it, and there has been no human in the process. The AI is working among themselves, creating smart contracts to make these things happen. And the fridge knows that by historical analysis that the pasta usually gets picked up at 6:30 by Bobby. So we need the pasta in the fridge by 5:30 or 6 o'clock. So there is a delivery time, there is a cost, there is a quantity, and that the whole information is passed on from the fridge, which is where the consumption happens, all the way down to the manufacturer or the warehouse. Now within the warehouse, once the vehicle says that, yes, I'm going to come for the pasta, the order comes to the warehouse sends back a secure token back to the vehicle, and with which the vehicle is given a clear path through to the warehouse gates and onto the docks, where a robo picks up the material for the delivery order and delivers it to the vehicle, because of course they understand which is the vehicle by the token that the vehicle is already given at the gate, and the vehicle now has the pasta. The vehicle makes its way back to Bobby's house, and the pasta gets delivered. Voila. You saw demand being created, being passed, contracts being made, supply being managed, and deliveries being handled, completely done by equipment that run all by themselves. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you this is scenario which is futuristic, but this is coming in. That is the spatial AI world that we in TVS supply chain are ready for. I guess that's pretty much the end of the presentation. Here we are. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan, for this wonderful presentation. I am really sure that people listening to you all over Austria and other parts of the world would be benefited with your expertise and knowledge. Thank you, sir. And finally, we have Mr. Sanjay Bhatia, Chief Executive Officer, FreightWalla. Mr. Bhatia, a very warm welcome to you. You may start now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ajay. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, let me say thank you to Advantage Austria for organizing this webinar and having me here, and also to the other panelists for the lovely sessions and lovely presentations that they did. So I will be talking to you about trends and technologies in logistics, though I don't think with everyone else's presentations that there's much left to talk about, which they haven't already covered in wonderful detail. Regardless, let me start. I will, however, focus my presentation a little bit more on the theme of today's um, discussion, which is about AI and automation in logistics. So, I mean, again, as everyone has already mentioned, there's a lot of different a lot of different technologies that are being brought into the logistics industry across the world. Some of the ones that are, I think, a little more on the nearer term horizon include things like artificial intelligence, the key topic for today, data analytics, blockchain, warehouse automation, and IoT, which a lot of the other panelists have already covered. So I won't spend too much time talking about it. There are other technologies that are on the horizon. So Bobby Mohan had mentioned a few of them when he was speaking as well. These include autonomous vehicles, robotics, and advances in other areas as well. Which can come into logistics and start having a broad and large impact. So in the interest of not repeating too much, let me just start. Let me continue by trying to add some nuance into the discussion. And the nuance I have to offer is this: the challenges in logistics that you see in developing nations like India are quite different to those that you have in developed markets, in the Western Hemisphere or Australia. So I got a couple of pictures here on the slide, which sort of gives you a sense of what I'm talking about. In when we're talking about logistics in the developed world, we're talking about a high degree of efficiency, reliability that is already in place, and of course there is obviously scope for improvement. I know that's where the technologies come in, but there is a lot of predictability already in there. The picture you see on the right hand side is actually a real picture for the entry into one of the ports of India, and it's actually India's largest port, Nhava Sheva, which is just outside Mumbai. And you can see that when we talk about logistics in a developing nation versus like India versus logistics in the developed world, it's quite different. The challenges are different. The approach has to be different. And I would actually pose it to you that the problems with international supply chains, the ones that we have right now, are transitory and will definitely resolve themselves at some point in time. But even thereafter, the problems with international supply chains will remain so long as there are challenges with the weakest links. And in this particular case, I'm talking about the weakest link being the manufacturing hubs in Asia, which are generally developing nations, generally have similar problems with logistics. So, on that front, I also wanted to add and say that digitization of logistics in India is a need. It's not a desire, it's not a want, it's not some means of achieving a little bit extra efficiency. Honestly, for a huge chunk of the developing world, I think in order to compete in the long run and for different countries to establish themselves as manufacturing hubs, digitization of logistics will actually play a big part in ensuring that there is a reliable flow of cargo, across borders. And on that front, I'd ask you to recognize that the Indian logistics industry is incredibly fragmented, right? So I'll talk a little bit more on the freight forwarding industry, which is what FreightWalla caters to. India has 27,000 freight forwarders registered in the country. Most of them operate very, very tiny businesses. Maybe they're 5, 10, 15 people by head count, have a small number of clients, and most importantly, they do everything manually. And it is these manual processes that ultimately result in all of the cargo delays, cost escalations, lack of reliability, and inefficiency that unfortunately is a norm in Indian logistics and in certain other countries as well. And I'd also want to call out here that access to well trained manpower to limit the effect of this problem is a struggle even for large logistics companies. So it is something that you find across the board when you're talking about India's logistics industry. It's not really limited to any one segment as such. And that sort of comes to, I guess, the core of today's discussion, which is about how automation and AI can, really boost and empower international trade. um, I've shared on the slide what I think are some of the biggest trends that would play out even on the developing side of the world. Again, all of this has been mentioned by all the other panelists. I don't wish to repeat anything, but I will focus my attention a little more on artificial intelligence and automation. So first with automation, as FreightWalla as a company, what we recognized about 3 or 4 years ago is that this problem that is there in Indian logistics, which is the fact that these manual processes that are driven by um, the fragmented side of the industry create a lot of problems with cargo delays and cost escalations. Ultimately, what we're talking about is if you could automate that manual process here on the Indian side of the border, you could actually bring into place over the entire supply chain a much higher degree of reliability and efficiency. So we sort of think about all of this as being broken up into two parts, right? There's your pre-shipment value propositions and your post-shipment value propositions. So in the pre-shipment side, it's all about making decisions, right? And I guess some of this has been repeated in perhaps Mr. Niki Frank's presentation, but when we are looking at making decisions in moving cargo across borders, it's more than just, as far as we see it, it's more than just quotations and schedules and transit times. If you want to make a really solid supply chain decision, it is even important to know in a click of a few buttons what is the actual on-time carrier performance, right? So you might be dealing with a carrier ABC who has maybe 90% reliability on on-time performance, and someone else who has 30% reliability. Now, the way that the industry operates, as we all know, the person who has less reliability will always be pricing themselves cheaper. But without easy access to information, the Indian supplier is often fooled, and he says, "Well, I mean, they're just going to deliver the cargo, and I have no real incentive to do anything except choose the cheapest option." Well, if they actually presented the data of who has better reliability and who doesn't, they can actually start making better decisions, which ultimately impacts even the buyer side, which would, in typical trade flows, be the Austrian companies. And likewise, on a similar vein, I also want to share that, a lot of the times that we talk about, especially in India, a lot of the times that we talk about efficiency and reliability in supply chains and optimization and, all of the benefits of technology, um, you will find that it's typically very large Indian suppliers who are, looking at these efficiencies. But India's supplier base is constituted of many, many thousands of SMEs as well. And they don't actually have access to all of these different services and means of analysis, which is something that we are really looking to do, right? So when you have a technology platform, you can actually democratize access to all of this information. Similarly, on the post-shipment side, when we're talking about democratizing access, there are the whole issue of proactive problem solving is something that the SMEs of India, who are the typical suppliers, will, I mean, it's not even on their mind. They don't even understand and imagine that it can be done. So if they are choosing the traditional fragmented side of the industry as their service partner, you are going to find that there will be a lot of problems with having timely information and proactive problem solving. Now, the way that we've built our system is to actually automate the entire process and then also overlay some business intelligence and automation on top of it, so that our platform itself is capable of firstly identifying problems in transit. It can be either ocean transit, or it can be on land or at the port. And it goes one step further. It actually starts initiating the resolutions in and of itself. It doesn't wait for someone to come in and say, okay, here's a problem, what do we do about it? Our platform itself starts initiating the resolution, which again just works. And we all know that when a cargo or when a shipment is in trouble, time is of the essence. Waiting for people to be looped in and then have the joint calls and figure out what to do is in itself a loss to both the shipper and the consignee. So this is what automation can do, especially when you start overlaying it with the artificial intelligence. And likewise on the digitized workflows, again, Mr. Niki Frank mentioned that the majority of the global industry of logistics is very driven by paperwork. Once you start digitizing the workflows, you really reduce the chances of errors across the process. And that's what we're looking to do as well, and have gotten a lot of traction and built a very solid technology platform on. A little bit of blue sky, similar to Mr. Bobby Mohan. I think if you ask me what is the future of logistics and freight forwarding, I will simply say it's about how you leverage data and how creative you can deal with it, right? Many ideas were shared today. All of them are valid. All of them are very good in their own ways. And I have listed over here some other trends which I think perhaps are given the scenario of today would be very interesting to look at. So we all know that container shortages are a problem, but if you have an AI driven system that is capturing the movement of vessels around the world, you can actually start becoming very precise and predictive on the container availability at any given port at any given time. Likewise for predictions of shipment delays, which is something that DHL mentioned that they're working on. Predictive analysis of future freight rate trends. This I think is actually a very interesting one because it opens up a new avenue of engaging with your logistics provider, and it actually offers the logistics provider the chance to become more than just someone who executes the movement of shipments. It even allows them to enter a new sort of sphere of logistics consultancy. So our system, for example, is tracking the freight rates, digitized freight rates for a long period of time, over 5 years now, and we have a lot of data and insight about how these freight rates trend. So we're actually in a position to be able to go and talk to our clients and say, hey, at this point in time, it's probably better to be booking your containers on the spot market, but we see that in 3 months' time, the freight rates are going to go down, and that's probably the best time to start jumping into contracts as well. There are some normal trends that are there in the industry which everyone knows about, but this adds an extra layer of nuance and fine tuning to it. And similar to this, of course, there's multiple different avenues that you can pursue in terms of how you use data and reimagine the way that logistics and the value additions to logistics can be, right? And just to round out my presentation, I realize I did not give a full-fledged introduction to the company. Given the paucity of time, I will keep this very, very short. FreightWalla is basically a company that I started along with two co-founders who are one from the technology industry, one from proper logistics operations. And what we recognized was that, as I mentioned, the real problem of the Indian logistics industry, especially when it's people looking to move cargo to or from India and they're dealing with SME clientele. It's basically that the existing freight forwarding industry is heavily driven by manual processes, which leads to a lot of problems, a lot of cargo delays, cost escalations because of errors in the process that they make. So our sort of technology platform is broken up into, I guess you could say, three parts. One is how you can plan your shipments more effectively, make instant decisions whilst also being extremely flexible in terms of route options, transit times, costs, etc. The magic of our platform is in how we execute shipments. It's highly automated, highly digitized, and the instances of errors in the process are drastically minimized, which ultimately means that both the shipper and the consignee are happy because they have the consistency and reliability which we had spoken about earlier. is actually maintained and is enhanced because of this system. And lastly, we have a business intelligence suite as well, which allows them to look through all of their data, look through their logistics performance, and start making optimization decisions. And with that, I hand back to Ajay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhatia. Your company is really doing a great job, and I have a strong feeling that our audience must be looking to establish a connection with you already. Okay, wonderful. I think our audience is very active today. Impressive. We have many questions from the audience. I will read it out as they were asked. For Mr. Singh, there is a question. Can you turn on your camera, Mr. Singh? Yeah. There is a question on you explain automation in logistic. Does this automation help in last 2 pandemic years? In addition, how can Austrian companies be benefited from automation in logistic in India?
Great question. Thank you so much, Ajay. And yes, I mean, looking at what has happened during the pandemic, lastly, starting last year, and some of the key challenges what our customers have faced because of, you heard from Mr. Niki Frank's presentation also about the schedule integrity of the carriers falling off. There was a large amount of cost, not just from a freight perspective, but there were constant delays, which was forcing containers staying at at the ports for a longer time, which was actually attracting a lot of detention and demurrage cost for customers. So because of the tools what we had, we were able to actually work out solutions, give them more visibility so they can plan it effectively. And we actually helped a lot of customers reduce that element. And this is all possible because of automation. This is just one example, right? There are many more examples of how they could have efficiently organized based on some predictive technology. We're able to bring through a track and trace about certain events, what's taking place in the supply chain. We were able to plan things effectively, which if they did not have a view of that, if there was no automation, that could have resulted them into falling into the trap, and that would have attracted more cost and more delays for the customer. As long as the engagement with the Austrian companies are concerned, being a global freight forwarder, we as cargo partner headquartered in Austria, one of the largest freight forwarding outfits in the country. In Austria itself, we have engaged with customers across different verticals, as I explained during my presentation, whether it was the automotive sector, the high-tech sector, and happy to engage with anybody, who's looking for solutions where we can innovatively use our technology to help solve those problems.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. And I see another question from Mr. Frank. You talked about startup engagement and exponential disruption by, fueled by startups with innovative concept. Does DHL support innovation from startups? This is part one. And what are the sector and opportunities for Austrian companies to be looking at with DHL in India?
Yeah. So on the first part, yes, we do approach innovation from a very broad set of angles. So we have our own corporate incubator program, so where we take up innovative ideas from our own employees, get them through a process, and ultimately, create startups, which we have a handful of them already coming out of that incubator. We do have our innovation centers and our customer solutions and innovation teams across the world who work with research institutes and startups or larger corporate partners. So there's always, when we look at new technologies and the applicability, there is a need for companies who are active in that field, and we're actively engaging in those discussions. So should you have an innovative idea or a technology that you're using that might be relevant for us, please feel free to reach out. Secondly, if I understood the question correctly, that's more general on what are some of the industries for Austrian companies to look at India as a trade partner. Was that the question?
Yeah. So what are
Yeah.
the technologies or the industries Austrian companies can be partner or to look at?
Yeah. So I think what we see in the current situation, but also in the past, there's a strong connection between Austria and India when it comes to engineering and manufacturing as a sector, as well as technology. There's a large belt around Pune, Mumbai, where a lot of our customers from Austria are active, as either where they source from Indian companies or Indian suppliers, where they have their own setup, or where they provide parts and components as supplies to. But I wouldn't actually limit it to any particular industry. I think India as a country is active in almost all industries, arguably at different levels. But whether you look at pharmaceuticals, where India is extremely strong and advanced, technology is a sector that is identified by the government to be a sector of further investments, and certainly automotive, machinery equipment, renewable energies are all sectors that are of high relevance, where Austrian companies would benefit from an interaction with India.
Yeah. Perfect, Mr. Frank. And I think this question I can pass to Mr. Mohan. How can TBS aids in business transformation, and some thoughts on digital experience in logistics?
Thank you, Ajay. As an Indian multinational firm working with global organizations, the key tenet of TBS supply chain has always been about how can you use technology to provide the best possible capabilities around supply chain. So for large organizations where they already have a digital footprint, we have a way of operating with them, trying to integrate with them so that it becomes an end-to-end operation. For companies which are not so much large in scale, but really agile and trying to get to the market quickly, we have ready-to-go solutions out of the box which you can clip on uh, and leverage to jump to the market and to take care of what India offers on a quick basis. We work with a lot of companies from the US, from Europe on such pursuits. And with both these options available, where we have standard suite of products, we have a standard methodology of working with standard integrated companies. We pretty much try to cover end to end on the requirements and needs of being digital, on transforming digital and making a supply chain nimble and agile. And we would be happy to engage at a consulting level, and then see how the engagement expands into more of an operational engagement. Ajay, the second part of the question was?
So the second part is like the your thoughts on digital experience, like how
Digital.
logistic. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Digital is an extremely interesting space. My thoughts is that it's only going to get better as we move forward. And the only way to work in this world today is digital. Manual is not an option. And if success is something that you're looking for, if improvement is what we're going after, I don't believe that we have an option but to go digital. And that's what I would recommend, and I would urge each of us sitting in this call to think really hard. How are we going to serve your children or your children's children? And that would make us all digital.
Perfect, Mr. Mohan. Thank you. And for, okay, I can maybe pass this question to Mr. Bhatia about what do you see in opportunities in logistics sectors, as well as with your company for our Austrian companies and startups and scale-ups. What are the opportunities you feel?
Right. So in terms of technology-based opportunities, I think if you look at the entire landscape of logistics startups in India, you actually find that a lot of them are very catered towards the full container load market. So if you have a good idea and a good understanding of what are the challenges with the LCL market specifically, and I guess to a lesser degree air freight, but air freight is quite consolidated, quite advanced compared to the ocean freight side of the market. But if you have something very interesting over there, I think that is a burgeoning opportunity, not on the operation side, which would be, about, when I say operations, I mean, I'm not trying to say that you should add like IoT to the containers and RFID tags to the shipments, but I mean more on the client side, because a lot of a lot of the innovations that we're talking about, and I mentioned this in my presentation, all of these are being catered towards very large companies, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in your small companies across both India and Austria. So obviously I have less knowledge of the specific Austrian market, but I think that the smallest companies are the ones who struggle the most with logistics, and where, if you have something catered towards LCL, I think there is a lot that can be done.
Sure. Perfect, Mr. Bhatia. And now I would like to request to our Trade Commissioner, Mr. Hans-Jörg Hörtnagl, for his comments and thanks note. Thank you all, the speakers and the participant. Namaste.
Thank you much, Ajay. Well, first of all, I would like to thank our high-profile speakers for their presentations and for sharing their insights, and I hope to meet you in person very soon. Thank you, Ajay, for organizing. And to our Austrian participants, any kind of additional information you would like to have, please don't hesitate getting in touch with us. And as I mentioned before, we also have a special tailor-made marketing engine program for you to consider entering the Indian market. It would be a pleasure welcoming you and helping you to get into this market here. So we coming to the end of this webinar. Finally, I would like to mention our next webinars. The next is on Future of Food on 12th of November. The next is on 19 November, the Bengaluru Tech Summit, and our India Day, which are on 5th of January in Las Vegas, where we're also going to deal with Indian companies and going to accompany them there. So as I already mentioned, if you would like to see this YouTube video again, please we have an own YouTube channel. You see it on the bottom, the address, and our latest news, as always, under WKD AußenwirtschaftsCenter/in. So thank you much, and with that, we end this seminar.